Welcome to Inside New York's Art World. I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein, and joining us today are two persons who've produced some of the most monumental in scale as well as in importance pieces of art in recent times. Christo and Jean-Claude, his dealer-manager. A warm welcome to both of you. Christo is your given name. You are a native of Bulgaria who left almost 20 years ago. Can you tell us when and why you chose to leave that country?
I'm born in Bulgaria, but I'm also Czech. I live in both countries, in Bulgaria and Czechoslovakia, until 56, late 56. The last time I was in Czechoslovakia in 56, and I passed the border in January 57 to Austria and Vienna. Why I left Bulgaria on the east world, other part of the world, no, it's many things. And of course, before everything, I was very young. I was 21, and this type of decision was most easily done. I was studied the Art Academy in Sofia, and I was involved with architecture, movies, and propaganda art. And of course, that is my youth and mid-50s, so during the Cold War. And I learned during that time about Russian Soviet art in the 20s through some Soviet movie directors. Anyway, you know, I was on the way, my decision was important to happen exactly that time, but because I was all going to Leningrad study official socialist realism, or decided to go out to do something to my life, with my life. There was the Hungarian Revolution during that time, started in late September, and all the board of Czechoslovakia was very perturbated with a lot of things. The Soviet army was on the border, but there was the way of passing the frontier.
What was your way?
That's a long story, but anyway, I was not official. I passed the border with 16 people, mostly Czechoslovakian family, and I found myself on January 10 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Vienna.
When did you first begin to wrap objects?
The first wrap groups, actually, what was these objects? They was called inventory. Or English word is inventory or
Inventory.
Inventory. There was the group of
Inventory is what you have proceeded to do for the last 15 years.
No. No, the inventory was like you were moving from your house, and you have the chairs, and you have the cases, and all covered with cloth and fabric, and there was the group freely put together, and there was the numbers of cans and bottles and all the materials, sometimes very small, about 20, sometimes large, about 40, 50 pieces. And they are all home object, you know, like object, and you can manipulate yourself alone. Some large, perhaps the chair, a table, that was the large. Of course, that was the...
What was the first object, a bottle?
No, there was, I don't know exactly what was object, but there was a group of objects, and there was not one object. But there was the number of elements who was in my small studio. Certainly it was chairs and bottles, or something that was directly manipulated by one man, you know, who was around.
And stop being manipulated by a woman.
Well, you have always known the effectiveness of size. Obviously, that was one of the things that you early on learned from your propaganda art. Yeah. But the scale of your initial work, obviously...
was small, because, you know, I was in France. I was speaking very poorly French. I have no any means. I was living in a very small place, and I have a 7th floor studio in a little room, and and the service room in Paris house. And of course, the only material was around me was very humble, small materials I can manipulate in that time or use for my work. But that was a very short time, because I should tell you, already in 1961, in my first show in Cologne, I did project inside the gallery, but I did a very large outside dockside project in the harbor on the Rhine River in Köln.
That was the first
Yes,
large-scale project
in 1961.
of the oil drums in
And also the
Cologne
wrappings.
Harbor.
And the wrappings. There was the huge amount of material of the dock, like paper or rolls of the industrial paper, who was wrapped in the massive, I don't know, 18 to 20 feet higher, about 30, 40 feet long pieces. Now the gallery was just in front of the harbor. It was very easy to do the piece inside in the gallery and outside pieces using the harbor sites and some ruin from the war remainings that was using like space to do project.
One of the more successful art mergers in history. Along about what time did you become interested in Christo's art, Jean-Claude?
The minute I fell in love with him.
But by 1961 and 1962?
I know Christo since 1958.
And were you involved in the oil drum project?
You mean in Cologne?
Yes.
No, I did not go to Cologne. We could not afford both trips.
And after Cologne, where did you go?
After that, that was the 1961. I was doing the exhibition in Cologne, and they built at that moment. They built the wall in Berlin. There was the very tension moment in Germany and Europe. You know, that was, I don't know if you remember, it's almost break of the world war, and the wall of Ulbricht was built in '61 in the summer. And I come back to Paris, and during that time Paris was an incredible political uproar, because there was the end of the Algerian conflict, and all the street and all the Paris situation was extremely acute and political, and motion of students, and it was very exciting. And I proposed in 1961 in September to build a wall of oil drums or iron curtain in the small street and the left bank and Cartier, Latin Quarter, Rue Visconti. And I tried to get the permits very seriously. I do the photo montage and do some drawings, and I start to ask the permits and the prefect and the government in Paris. That process was very long, almost a year. And I did the project in June of 1962. I never get the permission. After that, we go to court, and the police with Jean-Claude, but it was one of the long way starting doing project with a lot of problems.
But all of your projects have not only been monumental in scale, but with costs to match. How do you go about raising the funds for something like this? What was the cost, for example, of Valley Curtain?
The Valley Curtain cost $850,000, and we never use the word raise, because that is not the word that artists use when they sell their drawings and works of art. They never say they are raising money, they call it a sale. And this is what Christo does. Through me, he sells his works of art, which are either recent project or future project or old project or early packages. And he sells them through me, through the corporation of which I'm president.
What is the corporation called?
It depends. It used to be called the Valley Curtain Corporation.
So each project has its own
Now the Running Fence Corporation, yes. And the works of art are sold to museums, to art dealers, and to private collectors. And the money is used to build the projects.
Well, perhaps you might tell us in general how you select first the geography and then the specific site for any particular feat.
No, it's really...
Why California?
No, I think I'd like to talk about precise projects. You know, it's not, each project is different. You know, for a long time I was interested to do a project in California. For me, California was a huge fascination already in the late 60s. Perhaps this is the most American state way of living. You know, the people live horizontally, and very complex relation from urban, suburban and rural life. And of course, through all that horizontal living, they have a huge, acute notion about the land and use of the land, driving through the land. And if you take now the Jerry Brown and California legislation, they have the most high advanced law restriction of land use and working on the land. And this is why the project should be rooted in the community with fantastically acute and very nervous relation to the land problems. And of course, this is the why.
I like that edge of anxiety.
No, but this is because the project. This is why the project was horizontal, and this 24.5 miles, we're dealing with this three parts of type of useless land. Is basically east-west axis related, from very rural situation around the coast, going inland to suburbia and small town California situation around the Freeway 101. This is also is 24.5 miles, because I like to that the fence was crossing very typical element of the California life, the freeway, the very busy highway of 8-line highway. Now, all this was many considerations why we choose the California. The same things when we was doing Valley Curtin. There was many mountains in the United States, but again, all these projects should be done on a society, on community, where the people have very strong relation to their environment, their street, to their houses, to their mountains. And if you are aware, Colorado is the most Colorado people in Colorado, they're most strongly attached to their mountains. They refuse to have the Olympic Games, the Winter Olympics, because they like to keep their mountains clean, or mountains used, and the mountains was used in a very complex way between the farming and ranching and the sports. Now all this situation was answer question why I was doing this project in California, not near Cape Town in South Africa, when some friend owned 50 miles.
So then the political and social context is as significant, or perhaps more significant, than the topographical context.
No, they're all bounded together. You know, you cannot avoid it that this type of situation in California, of course, you can have it in 800 miles coastline, but I choose exactly this typical, specific situation. Same thing in Berlin. The case of the Reichstag, but the Reichstag is the only structure in that jurisdiction. But you cannot qualify some part more important and other less important. The most important part is really the driving energy for the physical object. If the physical object is not ultimate end of the project, that we will never arrive to this fantastic power of the project.
You mean if you did not really intend to build it?
Yes. You know, it's very easy, the conceptual artists and conventional way, like all conceptual artists do, that going through that process of several weeks or months, and you have enough political encounter and hearings, and I decided that I should finish the project. I learned enough about California, enough about international politics.
If you were a conceptual artist.
Yeah, a normal way.
So that you reject an association with a traditional conceptual or earth artist.
Yeah, exactly. This is the way.
He rejects it.
Absolutely. I don't think I'm anywhere artist. Because the final object is the ultimate end of the work, is like goal set it, and that is the energy. The work created fantastic energy for against the project. The true energy, and that is energy happened only because I pledge and I swear that until end I will go to do that work. Of course, that built up the antagonism, the forces, the committee to stop the running fence, the opposition of some Christian Democrat in Germany, and that created the fantastic rolling machine against the project. But that is the force of the project, because they know that if the project is not arrived, the final object would be a failure. And I have many failures. And of course the failure is very important, because the failure is the like cold shower. And the ego, very good to my ego, and also is the very refreshing, and it make you see things and consider it and revise things, and it's a very important activity. All this project is outside of the art system. This is the very important things to be considered. Actually, all the art activity, including the all advanced avant-garde activity, they manipulate in the art system at all levels, through the gallery, art Council of the Arts, and New York State Council of the Public Grounds, reserved for art activity, pledge to be art activity, things like that. Anyway, all that safe quarantine situation make art and the make-believe reality. What is important with the running fence or the Reichstag or the Valley-Carlton, they are outside of that art system, and they are thrown directly in the everyday life of the country, of the community, of the politicians, of the army, of the circulation on the street and the highway department, all these things. And of course, that is the like teasing the system. You know, the system is all the time teased. And the system respond very seriously, and that became the humor of the project, because the system responds very seriously. We go to court, and you have the three judges discussing the fence in court. The system
before the fence.
Before the fence.
While you were negotiating permissions because of some of the opponents.
Yeah. And three serious judges are discussing something that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah. The question is the same way the system is teased in the government of California, the governor of Jerry Brown, and all the county and different departments organized in public hearings to the radio, television, and the newspaper, and the people arrive, and the people talk against, and people for. Now, all that is how this work is done. And of course, that is the reality. Now, but ultimate goal, and that is the extremely important, is the irrational purpose of the project. And that is irrational. Total irrationality. Now this huge amount of energy, hundreds of people coming to the hearings, so thousands of people coming to the hearings, court trials, the only purpose of the running fence is not windbreaker, is not agricultural fence, is the work of art for a few days. And of course that logic to be injected in the mind of these people, of 500,000 people, is a slow process. It's not happening right away. You know, it's an extremely slow melting process together, welding process together. And of course, it's almost like generator, running like that. And after that, it became so powerful that it's almost like crazy. And of course, this is why the politicians, and California was some of the politicians, was very upset, because they cannot understand how 250 ranchers who are so pragmatic people can be involved with no purpose. But of course, this is the magnetic power of this project, because they have this incredible swinging around when it is electrifying, and in the end, there is no reason to have hundreds of thousands of people running around and putting the fence.
What do you really want them to see? Because you say you are 100% an artist, so there is something about their perception and something about their vision that I assume you care about too.
Okay, there was the enormous imagination built of these 3.5 years. You know, because the ultimate object was the fence, and through all these hearings and the court trial, the only things I can show with some sketches, some drawings, some photo montage, we really try to visualize the fence. But the ranchers and the people who support the project, and the people who was against the project also, they built some high-level imagination how the project will look. And that is was built a dynamic situation, because the fence was not existing. The fence was somewhere would be in the hills. And of course, because so many people was fighting against it, so many people for, they start to build a vision how the fence will be looking in the hill. And of course, that was one of the most important part of this project, because it's this type of perception of art. There are no museum exhibition, no any old exhibition can develop this type of dynamic relation of understanding of art. You know, really, when the people and entire community is in the type of communion with something who will become the ultimate work of art. Now, because that process was slow, it's not right away, I remember when the fence was going up and it was 24 miles, it was impossible to take care about the huge amount of friends and people and some of the media. We asked simply the ranchers to become our press PR people. And the ranchers invited TV people and journalists, and the ranchers was doing press conference in their land. They was telling what is the fence and how they was fighting for the fence and how was the fence is. And the way the ranchers was, for them the fence was his own project, you know, he was doing that for 3.5 years. In the first public hearing we lost, not out of the opposition, we lost because the supervisor was also not quite sure that they should let us do the project. And on the January 20, 1975, we understand that we will face incredible amount of very complex opinion of people and politicians. And
did you think at that point the project would not be realized?
Dear, I never think that, but there was some very low period of our time of exhaustion. You know, some of these public hearings was taking 7-8 hours. I should give an example. Because the public hearings built enormous media power, all the supervisors, congressmen and assemblymen was using them to be on the television. And of course they have all the television there and the newspaper, and of course they was talking of the fence instead of talking about the schools and building kindergartens, and they was in the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle and the newspaper there, and of course they was on view for the next campaign. And of course all that make the project very entangled with the political issue, who perhaps you think was not irrelevant, but became completely part of the running fence by the sheer importance, because the politician was vitally important and give us rights to the project.
Well, let's go back to the whole question of monumentality. What do you think your work has done to the credibility of and the status of monumental works? Traditional, conventional ones.
I always think that art in the 10th century was much more democratic than today, because in that time the people, nobody was involved with owning art, because the people owned the kings and the gods, and that there was the complete links, like for them the kings and gods was the same things, and there was the links directly with the art who was in that sphere, that realm existing. But when art became commodity, we start to own art and to share it, to share it, and to have it for us and only for ourselves. And of course, that is all our monumentality start to be dropped in small pieces. You know, we cannot have monumentality when you're involved with the commodity, with transportation, goods, and all these things like that. And it's very sad to see that we're claiming that we're doing public art, but actually we're doing only bank, garden objects and things like that around the town, around the city, on the places. They're not really profound relation. What is meaning the monumentality when was, and the scope, what was practiced in the 10th century during the building the Cathedral of Chartres, or in the early 1st to 2nd century. And all that is the long union of forces of energy, and is I don't know how long it will take until that our society understand that is capable to unload energy, if you like to call it, or wealth or money or power, that power can be unloaded for irrational purposes. Very important.
How do you plan to pursue the Reichstag?
Well, it's the same way as during each project. It's always different people, different country, different customs, different level of society, and each time we don't know anything and we have to learn. Now that we are specialists about ranching, we have to learn about international politics, but we can learn, it's all right.
And we have learned a great deal from the two of you. A very special thanks to Christo and Jean-Claude. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.